Get started. This is Ralph May and Travis Weathers. So, Ralph is a security analyst and a penetration tester at Black Hills Information Security. He is also a co-developer and instructor of the Practical Physical Exploitation course. Before joining Black Hills, he spent 5 years performing offensive operations on a wide range of security assessments. Ralph is a U.S. Army veteran who previously worked with the United States Special Operations Command on information security challenges and threat actor simulations. And Travis Weathers is a practice director on Optive's attack and penetration team. Since stepping out of the military, he has worked within the offensive security space, performing advanced adversarial emulation assessments and leading offensive security practitioners. Travis is the author of Doppelganger RFID and has spoken at various conferences, including DEF CON, RF Village, Hack Miami, B-Sides Tampa, and Source Zero Con. Additionally, Travis takes great pride in giving back to the veteran community through mentorship. So, please welcome Ralph and Travis. Wait, Travis? Yeah, sorry.
Yes, Travis.
Travis on evasive facility breach from Ingress to Egress in 15 minutes or less.
Thank you. Oh, there we go. Let's get this right level here. All right, I don't need to get too close. Welcome to our talk, and welcome to the back, I guess.
Oh, wow.
All right, so first, can I get a show of hands? Who is currently doing physical security assessments? No? What's a couple people? All right, who is interested in doing physical security assessments? All right, a couple more people, right? Who has no idea what this talk is about? All right, we got one. Perfect, welcome. All right, so hopefully you guys will have fun here. We are going to kind of dive in about us, even though she kind of gave us a big spiel. Yeah. Hold on, I got this little clicker here. I'm used to having a laptop normally, so this is kind of interesting. All right, Travis.
All right, nice baby photo, 80s photo, really.
80s, we're going for 80s.
Chose it for the theme here. So yeah, Travis Weathers, practice director on the attack and pen team over at Optive Security. I've been doing offensive security stuff since about 2014 when I stepped away from the military. Prior to that, I spent 12 years in Army Special Operations and Joint Special Operations in various capacities. Currently, working with Ralph here on the Practical Physical Exploitation course. I really love developing physical security tools. So you see some of these here. This is our stealth reader that we kind of threw out there. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but big passion of mine.
Yeah. All right, Ralph May, this is my baby photo as well. This is the most 80 photos possible because I have a mullet, as you can see in here, and this was a very popular thing at the time, maybe still today. Yes, so I do pen testing. I love doing physical stuff with Travis. Obviously, we built this course. I've been doing tech for a long time in different capacities, and I would say for the last 10 years, I've just been doing security-focused, testing. So, all right, let's jump into this.
Yeah, so agenda. Are we for real? Can you really break in and get out in 15 minutes? Yeah, absolutely, with a little bit of caveats. We'll talk about some of the remote recon, on-site surveillance, threat profiling, and then the unauthorized access and that 15-minute access window. So the caveat is all that stuff leading up to it. The access window itself is really, truly only 15 minutes if you're well prepared for it.
Are we for real?
We are for real.
We are for real.
real. Yeah, so properly scoped with clearly defined intent and goals. So whenever we do physical security assessments, we're talking with our clients to find out what exactly is it that is important to them, what keeps them up at night if somebody was to break into the building. Pro tip, as IT folks, it's not always gaining access to a server. Sometimes it's personal harm to their employees or destruction of the property itself. So keep that in mind. These are kind of the way we lay things out. There's always 3 goals when it comes to an assessment. First goal is always gaining physical access. Second goal, whatever keeps your client up at night. And then third goal will likely increase that level of effort. So that 15-minute ingress to egress window might change a little bit if you have to go after a bunch of different things within their environment. So solid operating methodology that's followed to the T, absolutely important. And then going in with the mindset of once your cover is blown, the engagement's over. So we'll touch on that a lot when it pertains to physical security. And then something we always tell our practitioners in the field is don't be a hero, stick to the plan. A lot of times as hackers, we get obsessed with
Shiny objects.
illustrating more impact and more impact and more impact. And next thing you know, you've deviated from that plan and that client intent was from the get-go. And here you are just running amok throughout the building. Chances are you're going to get picked up, nabbed, maybe even have to present your letter of authorization.
Yeah. All right, so how, right? Let's talk about the first thing, which is going to be recon, right? So having good recon is really going to help you before you even get to this assessment, right? It's going to help you, know what you're going to be up against before you're even on site. A lot of that can happen before you get there, and what you're going to do when you actually get there is confirm all of this information, right? The next thing is properly executing your threat profiling, right? So deciding how you're going to make your attack based off the information that you've confirmed once you get there, right? And what you're going to do next. Another thing is understanding the client's intent. Why are you here? Why are they paying you to do this thing, right? And hopefully you've gathered that in the conversations you've had with the client before you get there, so you have a good understanding of what's the purpose, right? And then following your letter of authorization, right? Knowing what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do, that's really going to help get the client outcomes that you're looking for. So you have, a successful engagement, and the client appreciates what you're providing for them, right? And then the last thing is this logging of all of the data, right? So when you get there, taking, what we talk about in the course is taking screenshots and other things to get timestamps of exactly when these things happened, right? So you can make a definitive timeline in your report and for any kind of legal issues if those arise, right? And once you kind of combine these together, this can really help you deliver that, very effective and efficient attack from a facility standpoint. So,
all right. So how? So we talked about 15 minutes. Yeah, it does take 15 minutes for the access and the post-exploitation getting out of there, but it really takes a lot longer to do your remote recon, the on-site surveillance, and the threat profiling. Now, I say a lot longer. I don't mean weeks, months. It doesn't take a big lead up to break into a facility. As long as you're focused in your efforts, probably 2-3 hours of remote recon on your computer, and then getting there on site, depending on what information you're able to gather for the specific goals that you're after. It could take anywhere from an hour to maybe even 2 days to do that. So as a consulting firm or as consultants in what we do, it doesn't benefit the client for us to sell them a long drawn out assessment. So we have to learn how to do these things efficiently. So that way it's mutually beneficial both for the client as well for the practitioner that's on site. The last thing you want to do is be on site for a month and a half trying to figure out how to break into a building.
They're definitely not going to pay for that.
Yeah. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive into the weeds of everything that kind of goes into it.
All right. So the first thing is remote recon, right? Before we get there. All right. So with remote recon, here's some things we're going to be looking for from a remote perspective, right? This is before we get there. This is our internet snooping. Luckily, nowadays, we have so many resources to quickly gather this information without being on site. It's kind of spooky. But so the first thing we're going to be looking for is workplace attire, if you can figure that out. So we have social media, LinkedIn, other things like that. If you can gather, we'll talk about some of the other, on the ground, like Street View stuff. But identifying nearby break and lunch venues, right? So is there a Starbucks close by? Where would they go to eat if you worked here, right? Do they have a smoke breaking area? Can you see that from geospatial? Operating hours, what are their normal business hours? Do they kind of have a 24/7 operation, or are they running 9 to 5? Like, what is their kind of operating hours? The next thing we teach in the class, and this is a great one for physicals, almost a requirement, is figuring out what their badges look like, okay? So most, if not all companies, use some kind of facility access control. The reason for that, obviously, is we're not going to give a key to everybody, and then when the employee leaves, we have to make new keys for all the doors. So figuring out what that badge looks like. People post badges all over the internet, okay? We'll talk a little bit more about that. So some helpful websites to do your recon, Google Maps, images, the web, just use Google. You can ask Google to tell you where to find more stuff. Facebook, Instagram. Instagram's amazing for how many people post stuff. Some people are oversharers, and you can find tons of information quickly without even being a friend or any kind of like association. So, speaking of Instagram, here are a bunch of photos of badges that people post. So how do we find these things? All right. So the first thing we'll look for is the company name, right? So see if we have any associations. They'll hashtag the company name. Maybe the address. So using a lot of times these posts will get tagged with the address or nearby location, right? Hashtags, any tag section. And then here's another really big one that usually nets us a lot of gold, is seeing who else they follow. So if you find someone who works at the company and they just have a picture of themselves on there, that's great, but they don't have a picture of a badge, maybe you start looking at who else they follow, and you'd be surprised how many times there's someone else that they work with, there's a picture of both of them together, and this other person has a badge photo, right? So we can figure that out.
Yeah, and a lot of times when you see them posting a bunch of stuff, especially on Instagram, most of who is liking or commenting on the photo is the person that made the post just to generate attention to it. So follow that person, follow the rabbit hole as far as you need to find that good quality photo of the badge. Chances are you'll get one pretty quick.
I see these all the time. It's like once you start looking for them, you can't like turn it off. You just see that everyone posts pictures. They'll say, oh, this is my first day, or this is my last day, or or they're just posting a picture with their friends out, whatever it may be. But they're wearing their badge everywhere. So. All right, another good remote recon, is LinkedIn, obviously, right? If you don't have a LinkedIn account, you can make one for free. But looking for job postings, technologies in use, employees' names, titles, there's a bunch of ways to scrape this stuff off of LinkedIn. And I think LinkedIn has tried like multiple times to make it so you can't scrape this stuff. But and that goes into another topic where you would be actually looking for email addresses. But let's find out who works there, because you might need that for some kind of SE if we get into that like phase or kind of scoped out piece. Maybe company events that are coming on. Again, we're trying to just establish whatever information we can gather about the organization and who might work there, right? All right, so the next thing we would look at, so we've looked at Instagram, we're trying to find badge photos. We're looking at LinkedIn for employees. The next thing is geospatial reconnaissance, right? The power of this is amazing. All of the world pretty much has been driven at this point with a camera, it feels like. So the first thing we might want to do is look at aerial map, right? So figuring out the general layout of the facility. If you were going to drive by this facility to confirm things, like how would you drive into this parking lot? You could use this to determine how many employees work there, by how many parking spaces are there. Is this a big facility? Is this a small facility? Identifying any, obviously, nearby establishments that are employees going to visit. So typically the way I do it is I'll find the establishment and then I'll start opening up my scope a little bit more. What's around there, right? Like what makes sense? Maybe are they in the middle of nowhere? All right, well, this is going to be a little more difficult, but a lot of times there is things around, like what restaurants and stuff like that. So do a little research, like kind of be an employee for a minute and think how they would think. Obviously, traffic patterns. Is it going to be difficult? Is it downtown, right? I've done facilities where it's the 28th floor in the middle of Manhattan, right? So there's only so much I can do from a recon from above. I just see a really big building, but obviously there's a lot of things around, like what is close by and how I'm going to do my attack. And in that case, I walked it, right? I was going to drive in the middle of Manhattan to walk around. So another thing too is use a lot of different mapping sources. There's like 4 out there. So we have Bing, Google, there's Maps, Google Earth, Apple has maps, and they all have different data, okay? They're not all the same data. They're all collecting this data, and sometimes that data is fresh, sometimes it's pretty old or stale, right? Another thing to do when you're looking at that street view is identifying any camera placements, viewing angles, so you could see if, what can they see, right? Sometimes you can't see cameras at all, right? The picture's not good enough, or they don't get close enough to the building. But if you can figure that out, that's good information to know, and then you can start building your GRG before you even get there, right? Obviously, looking for some areas that might be best suited for in-person surveillance. The parking, ingress, egress, like where's possibly the employee entrance versus like the main, customer entrance, depending on what kind of business they are, right? Sometimes it's better to use the employee entrance. Another thing that we'll look at too is determining possibly trash receptacles or any security, if they have any security set up, like do they have a security gate that you have to kind of check through to actually get into the parking lot? This is all really good information to know before we get there. Anything else, Travis?
No.
Okay.
So here's a few maps of the same exact area. This is in Riverview, Florida. You can see Google Maps, Bing Maps, and ArcGIS. Each one of them taken the exact same day, probably within minutes apart. You can see the community development difference between the two, or between the three. Pretty significant. So that's why we harp on folks looking at different mapping sources if you're not seeing what you want. A lot of times we'll go down and not know that there's construction going on. So having updated street views, that helps in most cases, not in all cases, but it's always good to know.
Yeah, again, this is all information we're trying to gather before we get there. And when we get there, we're going to look to confirm what we think is true, right?
Yeah, so again, on the street view stuff, here we've got pictures of the trash receptacle. If need be, we have to go jump in a dumpster to get some material to illustrate impact. We could do that, always a last venture. Here we've got a couple different choke points. These choke points, we talk about these a lot. These are great places to set up if you're gonna do long-range badge cloning. You can kind of filter people into areas. Here, I wouldn't necessarily do it in the crosswalk here, but here we see where it gets into the shrubbery area. A great place to catch some badges. People aren't gonna step off into the bush, so kind of makes it hard for them to get up and get away from you. Stairwells, great places, especially if you have a buddy to kind of help direct traffic so you get your badge read. We talk about long-range badge reading all the time. It's really not so long badge reading is what we call it, because oftentimes you're getting really
uncomfortably close.
So,
and a lot of times you'll have to get a reason to get this close to somebody, right? So there is some little bit of SC, some conversation that possibly has to come up. It depends though. These choke points can be great ways to naturally create an environment where you can get close to somebody without having to spark up a conversation, right?
So also with that, when we do our remote reconnaissance, the better our remote reconnaissance is, the less we're going to have to do on-site reconnaissance. Why is that great? Because the less you're doing on-site reconnaissance, the less you're exposed. Every second you're on-site at a client venue or appointment or place of business, you're there potentially getting discovered. Once you're discovered, the engagement's over. Client's out of money. You were unsuccessful. So the better the remote recon, the less the on-site recon. But yeah, go ahead.
All right, speaking about on-site recon, right?
So on-site surveillance. So we've done our remote recon. If we got a good badge there, we don't need to go on-site and get a photo of a badge. That puts us in a position that we don't really need. Although I would recommend getting yourself in a position where you can at least visually see someone's badge. So that way you can verify that what you have is in fact what the client is actually using. So some considerations when we go on site. Everything you can do can compromise the engagement. So now you're there, you're in the mix of it. Never expose yourself more than needed. If you have what you need from the remote recon, we touched on this, confirm it and move on. It's not a stakeout. Get what you need and get out. Oftentimes we'll see folks pull up in vehicles right 2 inches from the main lobby and pull up their telephoto lens, start taking pictures, or just overtly hold their cell phone up. If there's any type of security system in place, they might not be doing active monitoring, but when they go back and review the logs after your engagement, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, look at that guy, he's just sitting there with the camera the whole time. So don't draw attention to yourself if not needed. It sounds like a questionable decision in your head. It probably is. So you'll get those thoughts when you're there, like, oh, I could just run up right now and grab this badge clone and get out of here and call it a day. Stick to the plan that you set out for yourself. There are targets of opportunity, but be aware of what you're doing. If it sounds questionable, it probably is. So types of On-site recon. So we have mobile recon, and we have static recon, and then we have up-close recon. So our mobile recon, that's our dynamic analysis, the vehicle's in motion. The static analysis, obviously we're stationed up, posted up somewhere. So if we're gonna do dynamic analysis, we should have already figured out what route we're gonna take for our dynamic drive-by based on the maps that we reviewed, the street views that we reviewed, and same, if we get what we need on the dynamic analysis, we're not going to do the static analysis. If we need to fall back to the static analysis, we need to go back to that GRG we recreated, that gridded reference map that shows where everything is, and pick the exact spot where we want to sit up and take our photos.
The other thing I want to add too is on the mobile recon, sometimes you don't have to be in a vehicle, right?
Yeah.
Like I described the New York example. That doesn't make a great example for driving around in a vehicle. You could just walk on the streets. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of people walking the street in New York, right? Mm-hmm. So walking around is another great way to do that same analysis. I'd walked around the building, taking photos, other things like that. And then when I got to the static, it was more of trying to capture badges of employees going in and out of the building, right? I look like a tourist trying to take photos, trying to be as inconspicuous as possible, right? Yeah.
All right, so dynamic analysis, what are you gonna use? Mobile phone, this day and age, GoPros are great, dash cam, whatever it is that you have. Keep in mind your body posture, right? If you're doing your mobile recon, let your tools do the work for you. Set your phone up in a position where it can catch the video, and you could just drive. You might reduce your speed a little bit, but don't overtly slow down where you're holding up traffic behind you and causing eyes to be looked at you. Let your camera do the work, get offsite, analyze that footage, and then go back around for another pass if needed. If you are going to go back for another pass, I'd say wait 20 minutes or so. So that way you're not constantly circling the building because that will generate attention in some areas. Again, we talked about this, remote recon, let that determine the route you're going to take, and then only have the tooling required to accomplish the job you need. So you don't need to take the big kit with you. You've just got a small car, rental car to do your reconnaissance, post up your camera, don't have anything else in the back, make it look like you're going to work, make it look like you should be in that area.
Yeah.
Static analysis. So telephoto capable camera, something to take notes with, some consideration. Don't get closer than necessary. So oftentimes you can post up at an adjacent business to do your static recon, your static analysis, or maybe just set up in a different business entirely. Maybe you determined that, hey, these employees all go to this coffee shop, same coffee shop every morning around 8 a.m. I don't have a badge photo. Maybe I could just get a badge photo inside the coffee shop, and I'm not going to be directly exposed at the work site.
So another thing I want to talk about, the telephoto capable camera, right? We have a very powerful camera in our kit to do this, right? But I want you to think of this camera as a tool like a lockpick, right? You're not going to be great at it just because you grab and you think you can just snap photos, right? Especially at range. So my point with this is that when you start thinking about this, you should practice actually taking pictures with this camera before you get there, okay? Make sure that you understand how this thing works, right? It's not just a point, click, and shoot. It actually takes some finesse to use this camera at the range that we're going to be taking photos at. So, don't deny learning how to pick a lock before you get to the door, right? Same with taking this telephoto camera.
All right, this is a wall of text here. So some things we want to look at when we're doing our static analysis, right? So these aren't all things that we need to do right here in the static analysis phase. This is all stuff that we could have already looked at, checked the box on our remote recon, our mobile recon. We don't have to sit down and get all this stuff firmed up right here, especially if it doesn't pertain to our goal or our intent for the client. If we know that we're going to do social engineering because our client says, hey, we'd like you to get in through social engineering, I don't care what kind of badge technology they're using. So I might forego that. But in general, here's some things you want to look at. Badge exposure policy, right? So this would be a finding. So we do a inside out, outside in approach. So if you're inside the building, your badge should be out and displayed. The second you get out of your building, your badge should be in somewhere tucked away. One, so that people can't emulate your badge if they take a photograph of it. And two, they don't know where to go to clone the badge if you have it stashed away. Does it look like employees tailgate each other? That's a good option to get in if all else fails. So keep that in mind. Guards and service providers. So is there a reception desk? Where is it located? What kind of guards are there? Are they all stationary? Are there roaming guards? Are they law enforcement or armed? What do their shifts look like? Are they on 24/7? Are they doing roving patrols every hour? A lot of times we'll see companies like, hey, every hour on the dot, you got to go do your roving patrol. That's great for us as attackers because we know at 11 o'clock, we have a great 15-minute or so access window where we can get in where the security guard's going to be completely preoccupied on the other side of the building just walking around.
So another thing too, this comes down to scoping. You're going to know whether there's an armed guard before you get there. That's a question you're going to ask, okay? So you shouldn't be surprised that they have, a bunch of armed guards when you get there. And think of it first, number one, and you could say this to your client, safety is top priority for everybody, me and all of your employees, right? So that's why we want to know, is there an armed guard there? Are they going to, try to, shoot me just because I, did something suspicious, right? So
absolutely. Cameras, do they have cameras? Are they positioned in the right place? Are they pan, tilt, zoom where they need to be pan, tilt, zoom? Are they fixed where they need to be fixed? Do they have push to exit, request to exit? Where are those located? If you can see those, chances are if there's a badge reader on one side, there's either a push to exit or a request to exit sensor there. What kind of locks they're using? Do they have any man traps, turnstiles, those types of things? And if you are going after badge technology, you got to know exactly what you're going to go after. So if you're going to do a prox badge, you got to clone long range with the prox reader. If you're going after iClass or iClass SE, COS, you got to make sure you have a capable reader to get those reads. Another thing that could kind of foil your plan there is if it's multi-factor technology. Maybe now not only do you have to get a badge read, now you have to some way find out how to read what they're putting into the keypad, or if it's biometric. Yeah, probably going to have to take another route to access. And again, choke points, foot traffic, all that stuff. Continued. We won't read through this. Actually, I think this is a duplicate. Go ahead. Yeah. So close proximity surveillance. This is where we get really, really uncomfortable. We're having no distance remotely, no distance with our drive-by, no distance with no benefit from the long-range surveillance. So now we've got to get up close and personal. So we're going to pull out our mobile phone. And a lot of times, our mental notes or our logs are going to be just that. Take those camera snaps, those shutter snaps, log those, as you'll have verifiable timestamps that you can put into your logs later on. But again, some considerations, reference camera angles and viewing angles camera placement and viewing angles before you get going. You don't want to do up close surveillance right in front of somebody doing surveillance on you. That'll draw unneeded attention. Blend in with the employees around you. So if they're wearing a suit and tie, you should wear a suit and tie. If they're in casual clothes, you should be in casual clothes. Leave your 511 tactical bag in the car because that will always draw attention. Dim the device on your screen, or dim the screen on your device all the way, put it on vibrate, and disable the shutter sound. Sometimes it makes more sense just to do video. So you do your walk by. Ralph hit on this quite a bit. You get just a good video, take that offsite, analyze it, and then always have your evacuation plan. Another one of those practice it moments, okay? If you've ever tried to take video non-conspicuously with a phone and you're moving your hand around, next thing you know, it's all over the place. It looks like, a horror film, right? And you don't get any good photos of anything, all right? You're just like, wow, that was a waste of my time. Yeah. So the point is go out and try to practice this, okay? Figure out how to hold the camera, and be cognizant of that, because you're only going to get like 1 or 2 chances at this, and it's just going to start to look weird, okay? So make sure that you take the time to practice what you're going to be doing here. All right, threat profiling. All right, so now that we have the remote and we have the on-site recon, let's determine our most likely success path, okay? And now, obviously, this is going to come back to what we all just did, right? All of that information is going to dictate how or what we think is the most likely avenue to success here, okay?
We're going to go for the easiest route, okay? We're not trying to make this hard for ourselves. We want success. So we're going to pick that, right? Obviously, we want to stay within the limits of the letter of authorization, right? What they said we can do and what they said we can't do. If it's just tailgating, guess what? We're tailgating, right? That's the goal of the assessment, right? And we probably would have not done any badge cloning because that would be silly. So anyways, with that in mind, let's look at a couple different attack scenarios, right? So badge cloning, right? This is probably our number one thing we want to do. This gives us access to the facility. I'm an employee, you know, nobody talks to me because nobody wants to talk to anyone at this place. Anyways, so one of our observations is we see exposed badges. So we're able to identify the badge. We know what it looks like. We know that they work for this company. And we also identified that this is clonable technology. Not all badges can be cloned, right? But you know, we know that this is one of those, right? So we make a plan to get near employees to clone their badge. So for this example, we say coffee house or Starbucks directly adjacent to the facility. And so what we'll do is we'll go over there and try to clone the badge with a long-range badge reader. Obviously, there's risk of getting too close or them being, you know, suspicious of this interaction. But most of the time, you can get these badge clones in somewhere like a Starbucks pretty easy without drawing a whole lot of attention. So another thing next on the list here would be social engineering, right? So we did all that recon. Maybe we need to social engineer our way because we can't get a badge clone. Maybe we tried, and for whatever reason, we don't have that as our attack path. So they possibly have a turnstile too. That's another thing, right? And we don't have a badge, so we're not going to be able to tailgate. So let's try the social engineering path, right? So maybe we do a telephone call, like a pre-validation as a client employee, and then get a pre-auth to go in there. So we have a reason to go into the building. We're going to visit so on, so forth, right? We're going to be a visitor. So your SE scenario is going to dictate what you're trying to do. The only caveat with social engineering is sometimes you can do it quickly on site. Other times it requires a little like pre-step, or you're going to need to do it before you get there, right? Planning this up like, oh, next week I'm going to be there, that kind of stuff, right? So be considerate of that. And then the last one that we talk about is surreptitious entry, which, you know, maybe we have access to an unprotected door on the second floor. We're going to use a rope, ladder, grappling hook, you know, get wild with it, right? You know, and for the most part, that's like last on the list. It's really the last thing we want to do is like, you know, climb up the side of a building. But if the case dictates, you know, maybe that's something we try. We're all out of options, okay? And we want to, you know, look at that. And we have done some silly stuff like that. But also there's some risk involved. You know, do they have guards? You know, do they have cameras of you just climbing up the side of the wall, right? Is this going to be, you know, obviously someone trying to break in? And, you know, maybe it's well-lit area. So anything else? Yeah. All right. Oops. I went really fast there. All right, so the 15-minute access window.
All right. So we've done all of our reconnaissance. We did our threat profile, and we determined we're going to go in, we'll say, doing a badge clone, right? Here's where we really put it together, put our timetable together. Coming from the military, we like to reverse plan everything. So we'll start it when we want to exit the facility first, and then work everything back from there. So at 1 o'clock, no later than 1 o'clock, we want to be departing the facility. That means that between 12:30 and 12:45, we have our entry window during lunch to identify our goal of hitting their production floor and planting a shell or device on a workstation. And then before that, to get ready for that, we've got to spend a couple hours. So from 9 to 11, we're going to write clone card data that will capture between 8 and 8:30 after arriving at the offsite location for cloning. And then we'll already have our replica badge because we found that on Instagram 2 days prior. So that's our timeline. That's what we start with. Why do we start with that timeline? Because if something goes wrong in that timeline, we're going to immediately stop what we're doing. We're going to depart the facility, depart the location. We're going to go back to that threat profiling model and determine what our next approach is going to be. Maybe we got there, we're like, oh man, we weren't able to actually get a clone. We thought it was HID procs. It's not HID procs. Something's off. Or maybe there's something wrong with your reader. Now we've got to go and adjust focus and get in a different way. So it gives you time throughout the day to adjust and adapt to what you're doing. So if you put your depart facility time at closer to 5 p.m., chances are you make a mistake, you're not going to be well prepared to go back and reattack the facility. So with that, we'll go back to our engagement goals. So the engagement goal is overall to gain access to the production floor and then access to intellectual property. To do that, based on our threat profiling, we're going to require certain tooling. So a Proxmark with long-range cloning capabilities, or I'm sorry, a Prox reader with long-range cloning capabilities, a Proxmark for writing those captured cards, a replica ID card that looks like the client so we can blend in, a method to unlock or shell a workstation or drop a plant device, some other things that we might need once we get in there, an under-the-door tool and possibly some lock picks, and then of course our authorization letter. We do nothing without that. And then also with our reconnaissance that we did, we'll develop some type of cover story that kind of assists in that 15
I
minute
work in
window.
IT.
Yeah. So that is the 15-minute ingress to egress. I think that's the last one.
Yeah, I think that is the last one. All right. Shameless plugs. Okay. All right. So all that stuff we just talked about, we actually teach a 3-day course on how to do that, right? And we go through the whole experience, right? We talk about pre-sales authorization. We tell you how to scope these things, digital surveillance. We go through surreptitious entry. We talk about badge cloning technology, how to actually do it. We actually send you on a live facility breach, okay? This is an extremely hands-on course. We have role players that go out in town to act as fictitious employees, and you have to clone their badges out and around. It's a very fun class, and it's more of an experience, but it definitely will teach you how to go from someone who's never done this before to all the tools that you would need to actually deliver on this. We're not going to talk about every single way. We're going to talk about the most effective things that you can do in that time frame to actually deliver one of these assessments. Go ahead.
Yeah, so something I'll add to that, it's a high stress environment, so you're constantly moving, constantly adapting to change throughout it. It's not a 9 to 5 in the classroom. It's a 9 to 11 in the classroom, and then you're out the rest of the day, and then we're going to...
If you love PowerPoint slides, don't come to this class.
Yeah. You'll be going through the middle of the night doing recon on actual facilities. It is a lot of fun, but again, it's for everyone. It's not just for physical practitioners. If you sell or design project work, you can come to this class, get firsthand experience on what it is. You'll be a better salesman for it, be better at scoping it, better at leading it, all that.
So if you're interested, obviously it's on our website, and then we have a couple classes for the whole year here. Those are our dates.
Do private corporate training and government training as well. So,
do you want to talk about this?
Yeah. So here's actually our last class here. Here's them doing some reconnaissance in the middle of the night. The facility we've put up so many different cameras when they go in, so we got every bit of good angles to watch what they're doing. But here they are doing some remote recon. Or I'm sorry, on-site recon, mobile recon. Here they are. They found a dumpster. They picked the lock on the dumpster, got some sensitive information from our fictitious company out of it.
Let's go.
Here they are accessing the facility. It is a live business that has live employees, so they have to be on their toes throughout it. Here they are shelling a workstation. Here they are locking up the building on their way out. They had 3 objectives in this class, and I believe they were out in about 23 minutes from start to finish.
Yep. So we give you guys all the tools. We have the kits and gear, so you don't have to bring anything. You can kind of just show up, and we'll have all the stuff you need to actually do this class, right? All right. One other thing, obviously, we said we have all this kits and gear stuff. So we sell some of the gear. So what ended up happening is we were going to make this course. Cool, great, yay. All right. But we needed gear. And so we actually end up having to design some of this gear because no one sells it, okay? So a lot of this stuff is custom design. And we ended up making a whole Pelican case that has all the gear you need to actually do one of these assessments. And so that's actually what's inside of here, right there. And you want to talk about the
Yeah,
stealth
so we
reader?
talk a lot about the long range cloning and how it's not so long range. So we kind of came up with our own solution of how we wanted to get away from that, or situations where maybe we thought one technology was in place and in fact a different technology was in place. So we put together this stealth reader. Comes in different forms. You can have a magnetic back, slap it on. This one is more of a adhesive back, but essentially what you could do is slap it up on any building, any door. You can put it on a bathroom, and people will use their badge to go into it. You can put it adjacent to an existing reader. Think of it as
one of these before.
A card skimmer for corporate access. When it's in place, you use the stealth card. Stealth card looks like this, and it allows you to disable the Wi-Fi. So if they do have wireless detective controls, they're not going to see that, hey, there's some device on the outside of your building broadcasting a wireless signal. So just for example's sake, I'll put the reader down here. Here's a I-class card, I-class SE card. Here's a CIOS card. Got Prox card. Maybe. One read up. Got AWID. And EM. And yeah, so
Everything.
that's essentially it. I'll turn it on right now. If you guys want to go in and look at those card reads, you'll see a doppelganger SSID. The password to access it is under the radar, capital U, capital R. But you can look at the interface. You can reset the password or the Wi-Fi network to your own thing. But go for it.
Nice. All right, so that's all the shameless plugs we had. Any questions, guys, while we're up here? All right, go ahead. Yeah, that's a really good question. So phone-based badge access technology. So most likely it's going to be Bluetooth, right? That's usually the close proximity for that. It is slowly rolling out. The one thing that you're going to realize if you do a physical assessment or if you've done a physical assessment, a lot of the facility access control is old, right? We still see HID prox readers, which are like deprecated, okay? And they're still putting them on brand new buildings. And we're like, our facility access control guy said this is the best. We're like, fire that dude. But so what I guess my answer to your question is that we haven't had really like a whole lot of issues with those yet, having to attack them, right? But that's definitely where something like this is going to come into play, right? So if they're using some kind of technology like that, we would buy a reader that can do the mobile access, right? And again, I'm getting into a little fictitious here because I haven't rolled that out to see how it would work. There's some other things too that I've seen besides mobile that we're going to have to worry about in the future as well, as far as like facility access control goes, right? So the what's the other communication standard besides WeGAN?
OSDP.
Yeah, OSDP, but that's actually for the wire itself. So that's the communication on the wire. The other one would be what was the other technology we're using besides Bluetooth? Yeah, so an NFC-based like challenge response on your phone where it's actually verifying that you're allowed to enter via a request over the internet. So your phone is making an active request, right? As opposed to like an ID. So that it's more of like a, the equivalent of like OTP, like not one-time pass, but like KeyPass and other, password-based authentication where it's actually making that handshake. So that would be a lot more difficult for us to clone a badge because the phone is actually communicating to the device to make sure every single time you badge in, you're allowed to badge in, not from the reader itself. So, okay, go ahead. So we don't, right? We can see the angle of the camera. We can see if it's a PTZ, maybe it can move around or whatever. Some of these are high-speed PTZs that have, 20x optical zoom, right? But here's the one thing about cameras. Cameras are great, but most of the time they're not actively monitored and they're not going to stop you from going into that facility, right? Especially in multi-tenant facilities or really large companies. There's just no way the one security guard knows all the employees and what they look like and that this is not a new hire and other things like that. So seeing me walk in the building and looking like an employee is not suspicious, right? So cameras are used to figure out things in the past, right? So something bad happened, what actually happened, as opposed to necessarily solving crimes in real time, right? Especially at companies where there's a lot of people moving and going. So, good question. Right in the back there. Yeah, sorry. What do you mean?
For bypassing?
You mean like from a security perspective? Are you talking about like an alarm system inside the building? Buildings don't have alarm systems typically that we go attack because they have employees coming 24/7, or at some point. That's why they use facility access controls. So they don't typically have some kind of like motion detector that somebody's in the building to go off of.
I would add in the case that we've hit smaller organizations
Yes.
that do have motion sensors, we would hit them during the day when they're already occupied.
Yep.
We're not going to go in after hours.
The female in the back there. Sorry. For secure control, like in general, or for facility access, like the badging technology?
Oh, biometric.
Biometric, yeah.
We hit a company with biometrics, and it was they had several authentication procedures. So what we ended up having to do is roll it up into a full red team where we popped email boxes and impersonated people from their actual email boxes. We set up rules to delete emails from certain people and then would send other emails from other people.
Yeah.
It was quite a long process.
It was a twisted web. But yeah, so like biometric, other things like that, having a full-time 24/7 guard that like checks everyone in. At that point, you have to like combine you're going to have to combine an SC scenario as opposed to like a badge, especially with a really small facility, right? Mm-hmm. So it kind of like pigeonholes you into scenarios. I've also been to really, really secure facilities, and we actually ended up compromising the badging machine and just making our own badge so we didn't have to chase people around. Obviously, that doesn't work out every time, and not every engagement allows that like kind of remote access attack, right?
So plug for BHIS. If you go, they wrote a comic book.
Yeah, the zine. There's a story of one of my first physical and hardest physical assessments that I did with Travis in there. It's a comic book.
Yeah, it's that particular one we just referenced.
Yeah, go ahead again.
I would always recommend pre-authentication. That's usually the best way to do it. If you pre-authenticate, you can spoof numbers to originate from wherever or appear to originate from wherever. You can have them call people that don't actually work at certain places. So pre-authentication is always better than just showing up.
This also goes down to on-site recon. Maybe you see a facility access company there or some like facility maintenance company, and you're like, see that logo? You want to be that company because they're immediately going to be like, oh yeah, no, I see these people around here. They help fix whatever, right? They're the, So again, that kind of goes down this like, when you're actually getting your threat profile, what you're actually going to be able to do, right? And depending what limitations are in place, right? So it definitely comes in. Yeah, go ahead. you can take that one.
So in the past, yes, we have, but only where it makes sense for the engagement. One, it has to align with the intent of the engagement and the goals that the client kind of set forth for us. We're not just going to put a drone up for drone's sake, but depending on where we're going or what we're doing, we might throw a drone up just to look at certain aspects of things.
Yeah, the geospatial is pretty useful. Like
this day and age with mapping sources.
Yeah,
really
the drone value is just like limited. Does that make sense? Like it could have some value, but it's just kind of limited.
Unless you've got a FLIR camera.
Yeah, I know. Unless you've got an unlimited budget. All right, go ahead right here.
So that's a good point. When we do armed guard stuff, we will do more than one operator on target. So one will be responsible for the armed guard, so either distraction or keeping up with where they're at, and the other person is doing actions on. So it all depends.
Yeah, having more people on an engagement is really helpful. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. You don't want like 10 people because then it's just like a mob, but having a couple people is really useful. Yeah, right in the yellow, yes. Yeah.
That's a touchy one. It depends on how long you've been doing it.
Could you tell them the way not to do it?
I can tell you the way not to do it. Don't pull out a fake letter of authorization and say that you're there doing a pen
Test, yes.
So I would, yeah. The way I preach it is to deconflict first and foremost, especially if there's an armed guard. You don't know how that armed guard has been trained. You don't know what's going on inside of them. They might be like, oh crap, it might be time I need to tackle somebody, or something weird might happen. So you immediately want to deconflict. So what we tell our folks is you take your letter of authorization, it goes in your left front pocket, not in your rear right pocket, because if you're reaching behind, you can't see your hand. So non-dominant hand going in to grab the letter, hey, I have authorization to be here. You can escalate depending on your comfort level and what is defined by the
why are you supposed to be here? You know, how they're responding. This comes into some SE stuff, like reading nonverbal body language, you know, where this is going. A lot of times I can tell quickly whether someone thinks something more nefarious is going on than just asking legitimate questions about why I'm here, right?
Safety of yourself and safety of the people around you is
definitely
key.
Right in the back there. Yes, you. Sorry, I don't have any better way to identify people. Oh yeah, that's a great question. So you got to probably be about this close. So it's comfortable.
I could have done it right there if I had a reader.
Yeah, it's close. It's fun in the class to watch the other students go out there and kind of chase people around, you know, and and have to make up weird, awkward conversations. And it is very interesting when you're out there doing it. Your nerves are also moving, right? Because you don't really want to like give up who you are, but you have to like kind of get close, you know? And so why am I standing next to this person? So we talk about this too, like this is weird. This is not as weird, right? So how you posture yourself and then having a reason to get close to somebody, right? You can have a genuine, simple conversation. Asking for directions is a good one. I use my phone. I'd be like, hey, could you show me where this is at here? So now I have a reason to lean in. So there's a lot of little techniques that you can use to kind of get closer. And then obviously if you have that choke point where you're walking by. But you do have to get close. And, but hopefully if you're doing your job right, no one knows.
Yeah, choke points are key. You can pin people in elevators, especially if you have two operators. You can kind of guide someone where you want them to go.
All right, one last question right here. Yeah. Sure. We are not there yet, but I will say, so two things. Another slight shameless plug. I have a webcast coming on about surveillance, security cameras, right? And you are correct, right? Cameras can identify people. They're using this actively in larger deployments. They're pretty expensive, right? So that's probably why you're not going to see it in a lot of corporations, but that will be something that we'll have to approach, where you walk up to the door, the camera sees you, you're not the person that's supposed to be badging in, right? And that could be an alert. And that's what, you're talking about, like getting real-time response, right? And tying that in. That's an advanced deployment at a corporation. And right now, most companies don't feel like it's worth it in the budget to deploy something like that. But we could see that in the future for sure, because that technology exists today. Yes, exactly.
Something I'll add to cameras. Cameras are cameras, right? As much as we love them, they're not always being monitored, especially when they should be getting monitored. So a lot of times it's after the fact. And if your client is mostly scared about someone coming in the front door and taking people out, chances are, even if you had that AI camera there, it's probably too late to stop what was intended to happen in the first place. So that's where we fall back on. It's more about all the security controls coming together in a working fashion instead of having the fanciest whiz bang things going on.
All right, that is all the time we had. But if you have any more questions for us, we will be around the con. If you guys want to see any of the stuff in this kit, if you're just curious, you have no intention to ever buy this stuff, still come check it out, right? It's kind of cool. But thank you very much for coming to our talk.